What's going on, everybody? Hopefully you can hear me now. A little technical difficulty, but we bat like cook crack. This is going to be an abbreviated episode. We're pressed for time. So without any further ado, you're locked into the 456th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. It starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Thank you for joining me on the 456th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. Hopefully you can hear me now. Give me a thumbs up in the comment section. If you're out there, can you hear me? All right, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so we bat like cook crack. So I don't think you heard my intro because I think I still was muted. So this is going to be an abbreviated podcast. We're pressed for time. I'm up against it. So we're going to get straight to the proceedings this evening. Y'all know what it is. Social media maneuvers wise, if it's not a super chat, depending on how much time we spend on the gym dropping session, if it ain't a super chat, I might have to just kind of breeze through that, get to garbage time and the preview of Thursday night football. So with that said, there were some things that I wanted to chop it up with y'all about before I got into the actual podcast. There are a couple of topics that I really wanted to dive into. Won't have time for that. We'll have to move that to tomorrow. So with that said, y'all know how this works. We always kick it off with the gym dropping session. Don't act brand new on me. Let's get it. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind. Let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. So last week, we did not have our power index. And so in order for me to get you up to speed, we got to go all the way back to the week 4 list of the power index because I didn't give you my week 5. So in order for you to understand what week 5 was all about, we got to go back to week 4. That's the last time I gave you a power index. So week 4, the power index looked like this. The Eagles were 7th on the power index. At that time, they were 2-1. Weeks number 6 was the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had come off their first loss of the season to the Indianapolis Colts, but I still felt like they were a good team and they had a chance to rebound against Dallas at home. Obviously, we know how that went. At that time, week 4, I think we were going into week number 4. So, excuse me, Steelers were undefeated at that time, 3-0. Eagles were 2-1 at that time. So Eagles were 2-1. They were number 7. Steelers were 3-0. They were number 6. The Lions were 2-1. They had just come off of a win over the Arizona Cardinals in week number 3, 20-13. So they had jumped back into the mix at number 5. Houston Texans were number 4 on the list. They were coming off of being destroyed by the Minnesota Vikings, but I still looked at them as a good football team. Buffalo Bills were 3-0, right? And they were going into that big Sunday night matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens. So they were at number 3. The Minnesota Vikings had just beat up the Houston Texans in week 3 and gotten to 3-0. And so they were all the way up to number 2 on the list, all the way up from number 5 the week prior. And the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, were still at number 1. So now let's get to week 5. All right. So week 5, obviously, we hadn't played the week 5 game yet. So think about all of these situations and what these records look like and what these teams were coming off of the week prior. Now, and I'll explain it to you. So the week 5 power index looked like this, starting at number 7. Their first time cracking the power index this season were the Washington Commanders at number 7. They were coming off of the 42-14 destruction of the Arizona Cardinals. They were 3-1 on the season, sole possession of first place in the NFC East. They had been playing good football up until that point, and they had finally cracked the power index at number 7. Coming in at number 6 was the team that beat the Commanders and gave them their lone loss of the season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were coming off of a beatdown of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or excuse me, the Philadelphia Eagles the week prior. looked back to form after a very disappointing loss at home to the Denver Broncos, who at that time was winless. Since then, they've won 3 in a row. And at that time, Tampa Bay was undefeated. So it was kind of a head-scratching loss. They bounced back beautifully the following week at home against Philadelphia, and that prompted them to be back on the list at number 6. The Buffalo Bills check in at number 5 in week 5. They were coming off of a beatdown at the hands of I'm talking about BTA, belt to ass kind of beatdown at the hands of the Baltimore Ravens. But you couldn't dismiss the 3-0 start at that point. And the Ravens are a good team. It was a hostile environment. Things happen. So you say, same thing I said about Houston. They got their asses kicked by Minnesota. I still think they're a good football team. And I'm not going to let one loss deter me and tell me that Buffalo isn't a good team. I needed to see it again. And so yet the Bills were at number 5, coming off the 35-10 loss on the road at Baltimore. Houston checks in at number 4 in week number 5. They had the loss to Minnesota. They bounced back the following week against Jacksonville. It was not pretty, right? And they needed a last-second touchdown to get it done, but they got it done. That's the most important thing. Ran their record to 3-1 on the season. And so they jumped to number 4, or stay at number 4, rather. They were at 4 the week before, stayed at 4 after a very unimpressive, but yet a victory nonetheless in week number 5. Detroit Lions go from number 5 to number 3 in week number 5. They were very impressive on Monday Night Football. The Seahawks were undefeated, and they came into the Lions' den and left with a blemish on their record as the Lions rolled up 42 points, looked like the Lions from the year previous that we were accustomed to seeing. And so that was the best offensive day they had. Jared Goff was perfect. 18 of 18 in the Monday night win. Did not have an incompletion. And the Lions looked like their former selves. And they were able to get it done, get to 3-1 before their bye week. So they checked in at number 3. The Vikings remained perfect with a win at Green Bay in week number 4. They jumped out to a massive lead. They were up 28-0 in that game. And somehow that thing became 31-29 late, but they held on, got it done, and so they remain unbeaten, and they remain at number 2 on the list. Same could be said for the number 1 team, the 2-time Super Bowl defending champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Number 1 on the list. They had another win in week number 4, this time taking care of the Los Angeles Chargers. You could argue it was their least impressive victory of the season, but you could also argue it was their most impactful. A division win on the road, a team that a lot of people thought could challenge them for the division, gave the Chargers their 2nd loss in a row. So they've created distance from, in the division from them and everyone else by beating the Chargers. At that point, they were 4-0. No one else in the division had more than 2 wins. So Kansas City with a big win remains number 1 on the Power Index. Now we get to current day, week number 6, Power Index here on the Louie T Network podcast. And so this is the current list where we are. No need to play catch up any longer. This feels good. Feels good. So start with number 7. All right. A team that has not been on the Power Index since week number 1. And that is the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, Jers boys, check in at number 7 with their big win on the road at Pittsburgh, getting it done and getting to 3-2 on the season. After a slow 1-2 start, the Cowboys have reeled off 2 consecutive victories. They're playing confident football. We'll see if this confidence that they're playing with now rolls into Sunday when they'll play the Detroit Lions fresh off of a bye week. So interesting spot for Dallas. See if they can keep the momentum going. But 2 straight victories, putting them at 3-2, keeping them within arm's reach of the Commanders in the NFC East, gets them a spot atop, or a spot inside of the Week 6 Power Index. Coming in at number 6, the aforementioned Washington Commanders move up a spot from a week ago. They checked in at 7 last week, move up to 6 this week with their win over the Cleveland Browns. The Commanders have won 4 in a row. They're playing outstanding football. They're the only 4-1 team in the NFC, only one of two 4-1 teams in the NFL overall. And so the other being the Houston Texans. So this is a really good football team playing extraordinary football right now. They'll get their biggest test of the season in week 6 when they travel just up the road to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Speaking of the Baltimore Ravens, checking in at number 5 are those same Baltimore Ravens who have, shook off a 0-2 start to the season to reel off 3 consecutive victories. They've beat some good teams. They've played some really good teams. They've had a really tough schedule to start, have navigated it pretty good after the slow start, having beaten Dallas, the Buffalo Bills, who were undefeated at the time, and now the Cincinnati Bengals in a epic shootout, 41-38 in overtime. And so the Ravens continue to find ways to win. They're 3-2. They're playing good football. They now lead the AFC North after the Steelers had the fast start. They've caught the Steelers now, and I think they're going to pass the Steelers at some point here. I don't know when maybe the Steelers win this week. Maybe the Ravens lose this week. We'll see. But the Ravens are 5th on this list and playing really good football. Number 4 on the list for the 3rd consecutive week are the Houston Texans. Once again, not the prettiest of victories for the Houston Texans. Needed some late game theatrics to get it done, but nonetheless, they get it done. For the 2nd week in a row, they needed a final second score to preserve the victory, but they beat a good Buffalo Bills team and really made them look pedestrian on offense in particular throughout this game. And so the Texans are the only 4-1 team in the AFC behind only Kansas City's 5-0 start. So again, a really good Houston Texans team playing good football. Big loss though, Nico Collins injured his hamstring, was placed on IR this week. So that's something to keep an eye on. That offense was not the same after Nico Collins left that game. They jumped on Buffalo 20-0 in that game. And after Nico Collins' injury, they really failed to move the football with any true success in that game. So that's something to keep an eye on as we move forward with the Houston Texans. But they check in at number 4 for the 3rd consecutive week. Number 3 is the Detroit Lions. For the 2nd consecutive week, the Lions are 3rd on this list. They were idle last week, had a bye week, went into that bye at 3-1, winners of 2 straight after a disappointing loss in week number 2 at home to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But they bounced back nicely. Big win on the road against Arizona, even bigger win at home versus Seattle, a team that had played really well against them here of late. And so they were 3-1. Heading into their bye. They come out of the bye. They go to Dallas this week, returning to the scene of the crime from last season, if you remember, late season game where they feel like they were jobbed on a 2-point conversion where they said that they didn't have an eligible offensive lineman who did not declare. And so they probably feel like there's some business to attend to in Dallas. We'll see if they can go back to the scene of the crime and avenge last year's late season, regular season loss. So number 2, no changes here to the top 2, as you would imagine. They're the only 2 undefeated teams in the NFL right now. The Minnesota Vikings get a sloppy win over in London, but a win nonetheless. They head into their bye week 5-0, and they got it done pretty much on the strength of their defense. 3 interceptions of Aaron Rodgers, including a pick 6 in a 23-17 victory. They remain unbeaten on the season. The worst game for Sam Darnold of his Vikings career, but still good enough to get it done. A big injury there. Aaron Jones was injured in that game, injured his hip. We have not heard any word on how severe the injury is. Obviously, the Vikings do not play this week, so there is no need to really address that right now. I guess they'll handle that once they come off the bye week and kind of assess where he is at that point. But that's a big injury because they did not run the football well against the Jets, and that put a lot of pressure on Darnold. And as we saw, he did not play well. And I think the key to their 5-0 start thus far has been his ability for them to be balanced and not have to put it all on the shoulders of Sam Darnold. But they remain undefeated, and they remain at number 2 on the power index. And then, of course, number 1 in week 6 of the Power Index here on the Louie T Network podcast, the Kansas City Chiefs remain unbeaten with their 26-13 victory over the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football. They too head into their bye week undefeated. So much like the Vikings, those two undefeated teams will remain undefeated as they will both be idle in week number 6. This was a really interesting performance by the Chiefs, using 4 tight ends at one point. They went with 13 personnel for a large chunk of the night. They didn't start hitting receivers really to the second half of this game. Juju Smith-Schuster went over 100 yards receiving for the first time since like 2022, I believe it was. So unlikely hero there. We got another Xavier Worthy touchdown. And so the Chiefs just keep finding ways to get it done. The defense was stifling. They injured Derek Carr in that game as well. So the Chiefs just keep finding ways to win, and that's what the good teams in this league do. And that's why the Chiefs are undefeated and number 1 atop the Week 6 Power Index. So let's transition to social media maneuvers. I am a midday marauder. Y'all know what it is. So we got through that rather quickly, and that has allowed us to have maybe a little bit more time than I assumed. But I want to start off social media maneuvers, and we're going to get to the comment section. If you're out there, you want to have your comment read on the air, super chats are the best way to do that. It is the only way to ensure that your comment gets read on the air and we address it. Otherwise, use the hashtag LouieTLive if time permits. And I've already told you we're up against it today, so I don't know how many of your comments we're going to be able to get to. But if you want to roll the dice, use the hashtag LouieTLive, and we will address your comment if time permits. So I wanted to start off today with a interesting conversation that I told you we were going to have today. The topic of today's show and the title, are the Lions the most dangerous team in the league? When you hear that, you're probably thinking, are they a Super Bowl contender? Are they the best team in football? That's probably what you're thinking. That's not what I mean. That's not quite what I mean when I say most dangerous team in the NFL. I was listening to a short here recently, and I told you I can go down the rabbit hole with shorts from time to time. And I stumbled upon a short from the Chris Long Greenlight podcast. And I actually enjoy that podcast, by the way. There's some good content there. And listen to what Chris Long has been talking about all season with the Detroit Lions. And we'll get into this a little bit if you guys so choose. I'll have something to say about it. But take a listen to Chris Long and what he had to say about the Detroit Lions.
Hangover when you play the Lions that is evident. And it showed up in all 4 games that teams played after playing them this year. And so, like, you can go back to the Rams, getting throttled by the Cardinals. You can go back to the Bucs, getting throttled by the Broncos. You can go back to the Cardinals, getting throttled by the Commanders. And now this week, losing by multiple scores to a Giants team that were kind of like, yeah, they're an afterthought. It's the hangover effect of playing Detroit. I really do think that, and it's not gonna hold up every week this year. But when we played back in the day, I was on a very physical defense, and there was one year that we kind of looked at it and we were like, yeah, teams aren't, like, the offenses look a little sluggish after they play us. That's a point of pride for a group to say, like, hey, we're beating people up so bad they play bad the next week. And I think Detroit now has a defense to match the physicality of their offense.
So that was Chris Long on the Detroit Lions and the Lions hangover, as he's termed it. So what it reminded me of was the 49ers about 2 years ago, and it kind of bled into last year a little bit too. But it was really 2022 in particular that this really started to manifest. Where we talked about the physicality of the San Francisco 49ers and how physical they are and how teams don't play well the next week after you play San Francisco. There's this sluggish kind of malaise that you go through because you got beat up so much the week prior that you go in. And so one loss turns into 2, or even if you beat them the week prior, but it's such a physical game that you just played that you don't respond well physically the next week, and you pay for it on the scoreboard. And Chris Long talked about it with the Lions. And look, the proof is in the pudding. The numbers are what they are. And I've said this, the Lions, look, if you're a good team, and it doesn't matter, good or bad, to me, teams are a representation of their head coach. If you got a bad head coach, you're going to be a bad football team, right? If your coach is kind of aloof and he's not locked into the details, so is the team, right? The team's going to make mistakes. They're not going to be detail oriented. You see it. Teams are a representation of their head coach. And Dan Campbell, I told you I love him. He's my favorite head coach in the NFL right now, right? Because he's unapologetic. He is who he is. I love the Applebee's commercial. It fits him, right? But I've talked about, Dan Campbell, all of the Dan Campbell isms, biting off kneecaps got a lot of attention. But my favorite one was, hey, if you're looking for us, you don't have to look far. Just open your front door. We're standing on your front porch. We want all the smoke. Like, we're not running from nobody. If you're looking for us, you ain't got to come searching because, the narrative was, oh, Detroit's good now. Now you're going to become the hunted. You're no longer the hunter. And he's like, no. We're coming after you. We're not afraid of nobody. We know we good. And just so you know, you don't have to hunt for us. We're not the hunted. We're still hunting you. Open your front door. We on your front porch. Come on outside. We want all the smoke. And that's his mentality, and that's how they play. They can beat you up in the run game. They're physical, right? Smash mouth, no nonsense. They'll run it 40 times in a game. Jared Goff, they scored 42 points the other night. Jared Goff only threw it 18 times. They had a game against Arizona where they ran for over 200 yards, and each of their running backs had like over 15 carries. Like, they will beat you up because that's Dan Campbell, right? They have that mindset. And listening to Chris Long, I thought about it and I said, I agree with this assessment. Like, the Lions are a physical team, and teams haven't this season, as you can see. And like he said, it's not going to hold up every single week. But more times than not, when you play the Lions, you're in a fight with a lion. You're in a fight for your life with a lion, and you're going to come out with a bunch of scratches and scars, and you might not be ready for battle the next week. And so far, I mean, think about this. The Detroit Lions played the Rams in week 1. The Rams got throttled by the air, and out of nowhere. Like, who saw that coming? Yeah, okay. Puka Nacua didn't play in that game, and Cooper Kupp went down. But still, look at what the Rams have done since. They haven't gotten beat up like that in any other game this season, right? That game was over in the first quarter. It was 21-0 in the first quarter. Explain yourself, right? Lions hangover. Next week, the Lions played Tampa Bay. 20-16 hard-fought affair. The Bucs are 2-0. We sat here on this podcast and others did the same thing I did, but I'm going to talk about myself. I'm guilty as charged. I said, oh, the Broncos, they about to be 3-0 on Tampa Bay. Look at the start they've gotten off to. They don't score a touchdown in that game. They lose 20. Maybe they scored one touchdown. 26-7. They were never in that game. They were never competitive. They looked like they showed up at the wrong time. Like, man, I thought the game started at 4:05, not 1:05. Like, that wasn't the Tampa Bay team we had watched the first 2 weeks. Then all of a sudden, the next week against Philadelphia, they're back to their normal self. Explain yourself. Arizona, right? They get their self back together. They win 20-13. Hard-fought game. Watch that game. Hard-fought game. They punished them on the ground. Over 200 rush yards. Arizona had been ultra competitive the first 3 weeks. The next week, they show up. The Commanders come to town, and the light bulb never went off. I mean, they never went to the top of the top floor of the elevator, right? I mean, they were sleepwalking the entire game. Kyler Murray didn't even look like himself in that game. It made us ask questions like, did Cliff Kingsbury give us the blueprint or something? Because that didn't look like the Arizona Cardinals team that we had watched the first 3 weeks of the season. Then they come back the next week. Kyler Murray's running for touchdowns, pointing when guys still have angles 40 yards away from the end zone. They're back to their spunky selves, and they win on the road against San Francisco. I'm just saying they play Seattle on Monday Night Football, and they beat them up, right? Physically, like they do everybody else, win or lose. Seattle goes home, and I said they don't look right. I watched that game, and the Seahawks didn't look right. I said, I told you guys this yesterday or a couple of days ago on the podcast. I said, maybe they just thought the Giants were going to lie down and they didn't take them serious because they didn't seem like they matched the Giants' intensity. Remember I said that? Doesn't it make a little bit of sense? why they didn't match the Giants' intensity? They didn't have it. They didn't have that energy to give. Just a thought. Maybe the Lions hangover is real. You tell me what you think. I think there's some validity to it. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. We saw it before with the 49ers a couple of years ago, and that thing proved to be real. I think the Lions might be on to something here. They might be the next team in line that you just don't want to play them because you could end up having 2 losses because of one game. That's a tough thing to. I mean, and as you heard Chris Long say, that's a badge of honor you wear as a defense, that we're beating teams up, and really not just the defense, because I think it's an offensive thing too. Like, they're running the football, their line is physical, they get after you. Like, I just think overall that's a physical team, period. You wear that as a badge of honor as an entire team. That, our grit, our toughness, our physicality, you can't match it. And it not only impacts you in the game when we play you, it impacts you the week after. That's saying something. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the comment section. Silver V, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Silver V writes, hey, Louie, if the Dolphins end up with the top 10 pick, should they or would they even take a quarterback? That's a great question, Silver V. I personally would entertain the thought of taking a top 10 quarterback if I were them. I just think you got to understand what Tua's future looks like, and you can't play yourself into thinking that this isn't going to happen again. Tua Tagovailoa is going to, if he comes back, and I told you, it feels like he's going to be back in the NFL. I can't see him retiring, and it just doesn't feel like that's what's going to happen with him. It's hard to tell somebody who, does a sport for a living that they're still physically capable of doing it. Hey, you can't do this anymore. It may impact you later on in life. They're just not trying to hear that. It's the same thing with boxers, where you go, come on, bro, you made enough money. You don't really need to do this anymore. And they can't walk away. That's all they know is boxing. It's all Tua knows is football. So it's hard it's hard for me to fathom him walking away. They've given him so much money already. I don't know if they would be willing to invest in another top 10 quarterback. If I were them, I'd do it. I mean, because you don't have a chance. First of all, you weren't winning the Super Bowl with Tua anyway. And look, they weren't ever going to admit that. But that was the truth of the matter. They weren't winning the Super Bowl with Tua Tagovailoa anyway. So why not throw another dart at the board here and see if you can't find an upgrade at that position? And look, you could draft a guy that maybe isn't ready to help yet. Like, let's say Carson Beck comes out and you like him. I don't love Carson Beck, by the way. But let's say he comes out and you think he's good, but he's not ready yet. He could use some seasoning. Great. He could sit behind Tua for a year or two, right? If I were the Dolphins, because look where they are right now. Like, you can't afford to put yourself in this position again, because it's going to happen again. Tua's going to get hit. You think he's going to avoid hits for the rest of his career? He's going to get hit. He's going to have another concussion. And then what? You got to go to Tyler Huntley, or you got to sign some Joe Schmo off the streets who wasn't on an NFL roster to try to help you compete? There's no way to live. If you're the Dolphins, this season goes sideways, and there's a realistic possibility that it could. I think you have to entertain the idea of drafting a quarterback with your pick. That has to be a part of the thought process. If you're Chris Greer, the GM of the Miami Dolphins, you have to entertain the idea of potentially drafting a quarterback. I think that is something that you have to discuss. Even if you don't do it, that's a real discussion in some of those meetings that they're having in Miami. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Door Gunner writes, watching on my phone, still don't have power yet. How are you charging your phone? Are you charging it in your vehicle? LTN is like cook crack. Have to get my fix. I want to win so bad on Sunday. I'm just glad you're safe, bro. Like, seriously, all jokes aside, like, I'm just glad you're okay. We're hearing from you. You're in constant communication with us. It's always scary and dangerous when you don't have power and you're not done yet. You're not out of the woods. You could have another one coming, right down the pipeline. So, there's no telling when you're going to be back functioning at normal efficiency with power and all the working amenities that you're accustomed to. But this ain't your first rodeo either, right? If you live in Florida, this is standard operating procedure. Once you see the storm coming, you brace yourself, you hunker down, you get all the necessary things you need in order to survive. And I'm pretty sure you've done that. And then you have extra experience having been a member of the military. So you're good to go. I'm not as concerned about you as I am others, but I still am happy to hear that you're okay. And I'm glad that I'm able to help you get through some of this time that you are having to get by without power. Like, people forget, because we take stuff like having power for granted. Having power is so huge. Let me ask you, do you have running water? You don't have to super chat me this. You can just put it in the comment section. I can see it. You have running water, door gunner? I hope you have at least that, because you can figure everything else out. But do you have running water? Not having power sucks, because so much of our lives revolves around having, as they call it in the islands, current. So I want to win on Sunday very badly as well. But I want to win every week. Sunday, good. You have running water. I'm glad to hear that. Sunday is a little bit heightened, but I want to win every week. You know what I mean? I'm greedy. I want to win every week. So glad to hear you have running water. And hey, if you could just keep in contact with us, man, on these streams, just say something so we know you're there. That'll make me feel good, just knowing you're okay. Hot out and no air conditioning. I know it's brutal, bro. It's brutal. I know. Hang in there. Ryan E, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Carbon, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, "What's up, Lou? What up, Ryan? Given the way this season is going, is there any way that this team is not on Hard Knocks next year? I don't think we can turn it down, and we are must-see TV." Yes, there's a way we're not on Hard Knocks. If we make the playoffs, we can turn down Hard Knocks. All right. The only way that you are forced to be on Hard Knocks is if you don't have a new head coach, which we had a new head coach this year, so we could turn it down, and we did. You have to have not made the playoffs in any of the last 2 years, right? If we make the playoffs this year, then we don't have to be on Hard Knocks. Or you've been on it in the last 10 years. We haven't been on it ever, so that's not a thing for us. So the one that we would check off is we made the playoffs in one of the last 2 years. So we make the playoffs, I can assure you Dan Quinn isn't going to invite the Hard Knocks cameras into our facilities, and I wouldn't either, right? So yeah, we're not doing Hard Knocks because we're going to make the playoffs. At this point, if things continue in the direction it's going, we're going to make the playoffs. And if we make the playoffs, we're not going to be on Hard Knocks. So anyway, I digress. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Kevin writes, "Lou, you should see these coping Bear fans hating on JD." Oh, we see it. Trust me. We see it. It's so ugly. It's so messy. And I told the fans already, fear is a very dangerous thing. They're scared that they got the wrong guy. And like you said, they're coping. And I was having a conversation with Condo P. I said, look, I talked about this last night, and I tried to warn Commanders fans that this energy was coming, right? Fear it's one of two things that you're going to see. Like, Ravens fans have the same thing, but they're less insecure because they have Lamar Jackson. They just don't want anybody infringing upon their territory. They've got the one dynamic mobile quarterback, dual threat in the league that's the best, and nobody else is touching him, and he's two-time MVP. And so they don't want anybody infringing upon their territory and their turf. And Lamar, and our guy is, I think, a better version of Lamar Jackson. And they're not trying to hear that shit. And I get it. But that's where the fear comes from Ravens fans. So I get it. This is the thing about Bears fans. no one has quarterback PTSD more so than the Bears. They've been in the quarterback wilderness longer than anybody else. We've been in it for a very long time. They've been in it even longer. But I always say they had Jay Cutler. At least they had Jay Cutler, right? We didn't have that. But they never had a 4,000-yard passer in their. They have never had anybody like just the Bear essentials. They've never had that at quarterback. So they just swung and missed with Justin Fields, and they want to be right about Caleb Williams, and they want to be right so bad about Williams that they want Jaden Daniels to be bad so they can validate their selection at 1. And I'm like, you don't have to worry about what our guy is doing. If your guy's playing well, there's enough space here for both of our quarterbacks to be really good. Like, it's not one or the other. One doesn't have to suck so the other one can be good. They just don't want to admit that they got the wrong guy, right? Nobody wants to admit, damn, we had the number 1 pick. We went through this process and we took the wrong guy, right? So they're making up all kinds of excuses, and I'm seeing, and it's, I'm, you know what? I don't get mad about it. It's just clownery. It's ass clownery at its finest, and I'm disappointed in Bears fans because they should be more focused on their product. You should be worried about Caleb Williams and his development, not what we got going on over here. We're 4-1. We got the number 1 offense in football. Our quarterback is winning NFC Offensive Rookie of the Week almost every week. You shouldn't be worried about our guy. Worry about your guy. He just came off of his best week of his career. You should be ecstatic about that. Not over here worrying about what our guy is doing, right? Even in our guy's worst statistical game of the season, he still wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. You should be worried about what you got going on over there. You just won your 2nd game in a row. Be happy about that. But no, they're miserable because they know they didn't get the right guy. And it's okay. And that's the fear coming out of Bears fans. On one hand, I feel for them. On the other hand, I love it. If you're gonna be shady and you're gonna be miserable, even though you got something and you need to, kind of nurture what you have. If you're gonna be miserable and want to be all up in our mix, I ain't got nothing but I got all the smoke for you. All of it. It's a sad existence. It really is. Really is. But I knew this was coming. So I'm not tripping. Mama Commander got them yams. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, been a minute for a super chat, but it needs the link for that hat. Also need that they don't stink. They stink soon. We getting that dub this Sunday. I love it. Man, I got so much stuff I'm sitting on. I'm gonna get my life together and start putting out this merch because we back up. And I got a lot of ideas and a lot of stuff that I need to put on shirts and hats and things. And so don't you worry. I'm getting my life together. I'm gonna start that process this weekend. But glad to hear from you. And I hope we get this dub on Sunday, man. We got so much confidence, but this is a different animal we're dealing with in Baltimore, man. Different animal we're dealing with this week. So we will see. Door Gunner. Holy shit. Power back. LOL. Double up. That's a great double up. I spoke it into existence. You are welcome, Door Gunner. You are welcome. There you have it. All right. If you need me, let me know. All right. I can put a call in. Make sure you get that power, man. No, seriously. So happy for you, bro. Hey, take advantage of it because no telling what this weekend holds in store for you. Take advantage of this power while you got it. Charge up all devices. Take advantage of everything while you got it because we got another storm coming. There ain't no guarantee that the power's gonna stay on, right? So take advantage of it. Charge up all your devices. Get everything where you need it to be, just in case you gotta brave the elements once again. So I love it, man. I love it. So that's awesome. Awesome to hear, man. All right. So let's see if we got any hashtags. I can take 1 or 2 hashtags. Let's see. John Madrano writes, LT, I keep hearing the narrative Jaden hasn't played a real defense. What do you say to those people? I've talked about that already. I don't really have much to say to them. What are the Cleveland Browns? What are they? Mince meat? They're not a good team, but they have a good defense. What are they? Chopped liver? Like, what are we talking about here, man? Like, the Browns have a quality defense. All right. The Bucks aren't trash on. Well, they just gave up. That's not a good team to use. They just gave up 500 yards passing to Kirk Cousins. That's not the best team to use it as an example. Arizona's not a terrible defense. Cincinnati stinks right now on defense. But when we saw them, they didn't stink, right? So, again, this is the thing. You don't have to explain yourself to anybody. I don't make a habit of explaining myself to anybody. I don't talk to Bears fans who have that type of energy. For what? I'm gonna keep minding my business, man. We play the Bears. We see them. We get to answer any questions that they have. You think he's Justin Fields? Okay, we get to show you, right? Don't worry. We play you in a couple of weeks. No worries. We'll attend to you in due time. Well, we got bigger fish to fry. We're playing the Ravens this week. I ain't worried about nothing else, right? We'll see what happens. I would assume that if he carves up the Ravens defense, well, the Ravens don't have a good defense either. That's what they're going to say. I don't care. At this point, he's one of them ones. I've already anointed him. So has everyone else. So what difference does it make what others are saying? Those who know, right? Kevin, the PRF says, you think the Rodgers project will disintegrate or will the ship be righted to join the Bucks and Rams' success in leeching off of legacy QBs? So remember when I said we were going to talk about the Jets and I had an interesting take? So I wanted to talk about the whole, because I told you guys there's something off. Remember I kept saying it and I said, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. And we never talked about it. And then obviously before we could talk about it, Robert Saleh got fired. And it's dysfunction. Like Woody Johnson is a terrible owner. And that's why the Jets haven't made the playoffs since 2009, because he's a terrible owner. And he's impulsive. And he did the thing that you never want to see your owner do, and that's choose the player over the coach, right? Especially, it'd be one thing if the player was a guy that had been in the organization for a number of years, had done a number of things to uplift the organization. And, like if it's Patrick Mahomes, you're like, okay, how much longer is Andy Reid going to coach? But even then, you never want to put a player on a pedestal to where he has enough power to oust a coach. They effectively did that. We saw it here in Washington firsthand with Robert Griffin III and Mike Shanahan. You just can't ever put your team in that position. And Woody Johnson just did that. And Rodgers went on. Pat McAfee tried to diffuse the situation, but we all know the truth. Like, I was going to tell you guys that this felt like the Bucks 2020 situation. Remember, it started off rough. Tom Brady was being called out in the media by Bruce Arians, for his play early in that season. And it took them a while to get their shit together. They didn't look like a Super Bowl team. Then they went on their bye week. They came off and they played a succession of bad teams and they got their shit up and they got to the playoffs and they were a juggernaut, right? And they figured it out and they hit their stride and they won the Super Bowl. I thought that that's what was going on with the whole Salah situation. It was odd. And, he was calling out Aaron Rodgers after a game and maybe you shouldn't do the cadence thing. And Rodgers is like, bro, shut up. Maybe you should get the players to be more disciplined. And I was like, maybe this is going to turn out to be the Bucks. Nah, that's not what this is. This shit is sloppy. This shit is dysfunctional. And you can't win amongst dysfunction. We've seen it. We saw it firsthand here in Washington. You can't win. There's only so much winning that can take place in dysfunction. Like there's only so much freshness that can come out of funk, right? If you stink, you can put on all the deodorant, cologne, good smell goods you want. But if you funky at your core, you stink, that's gonna shine through. You funky, you stink. And this organization is dysfunctional. You can't have wins consistently come out of dysfunction. And Jeff Albrecht is going to do his best job. And they've already demoted Nathaniel Hackett, right? And they've promoted one of their other coaches to offensive coordinator and the play caller, which is a good thing because Hackett is trash. And I've said that already. But here's the problem. You still got guys like Sauce Gardner's like, Robert Saleh changed my life. I text him on his birthday every year. And we doing this for him. And like it's a locker room divided and torn, and we know why he was fired, because he was gonna fire Nathaniel Hackett. He was gonna do something with Hackett's ass, and Rodgers was like, "Nah, that's my guy." And so they got rid of Salah, and that's not how you conduct business. This doesn't feel like Bucks 2020. It did at first. It doesn't now with the firing going on. It doesn't feel like you don't win Super Bowls with interim head coaches. Hell, you barely make the playoffs. Rich Bisaccia made the playoffs with the Raiders, and I think he was one of the first interim coaches to do that. You don't make the playoffs with interim coaches. So, nah, this shit ain't gonna go the way that they probably intended it to go. But I digress. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Door Gunner writes, my whole life, people and things trying to kill me. You know I'm prepared, Lou. LOL. I know you are. That's why I said your background, I don't worry about you. I worry about others who aren't as trained and prepared as you are in those situations. I'm not worried about you. But I still want you to have the amenities, right? I still want you to have a good quality of life. You're my guy. So I still want you to have all those things. So Swaggy P, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy. Swaggy P, thank you for being a member of the MOBB writes, if we win Sunday, I'm going to be like, la, 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 la. Wait till I get my money, right? Day. Excuse me. Was you saying something? You can't tell me nothing. You and me both. Day. We both gonna be doing that. Both of us. We're gonna be doing the same thing, Swaggy P. They gonna hate me. Look, man, they better not let us win on Sunday. They gonna hate me. Oh man. You think it's bad now? I've already said it. I'm trying to be nice, but I don't have a modest bone in my body right now. Not a single one. Let us win on Sunday. I told you, the first one changed everything. I went crazy after that, right? I said, this one changes everything again. Because now you go from, hey, we making the playoffs to, hey, we can win the Super Bowl. They don't want that from me. They're not ready for that. They're not ready for that from me. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to our final segment of the show. And of course, that is garbage time. So we got a Thursday night NFC West family business showdown. If these two teams said they ain't did it, then they ain't did it. But if they did, well, that's NFC West family business. And this is some very important. Just like last week, I prefer family business on Thursdays. Because even if the game isn't good, the Dallas Giants game wasn't good. At least it was close and competitive. You're going to get competitive normally, right? Bills and Dolphins, far from competitive on Thursday night football, 3-4 weeks ago, whatever it was. But I feel confident that you're more likely to get a good Thursday night game if you put two teams in the division because they know each other. So looking forward to this game. It's a big game for both teams involved because the 49ers are not themselves right now. I don't think that the 49ers are who they have been over the last couple of years. But that doesn't change the fact that I respect the 49ers. And at any point, they could get their shit together. So I'm looking at this game as an opportunity for San Francisco, who right now is not in first place in their division, right? They are currently 2-3 on the season. Seattle is 3-2 and leads that division. All right. San Francisco is now tied at 2-3 with the Arizona Cardinals. And this is important more so for the 49ers than it is Seattle because Seattle has won inside the division. I believe they've already beaten, I think they've beaten the Rams already, if I'm not mistaken. I thought they played somebody in one. They may not have played a division game yet. Let me see. Seattle, week 1, Denver. Week 2, Seattle played. Who did they play in week 2? Felt like they played somebody in their division in week 2. Maybe they didn't. No, they couldn't have, because the Cardinals and the Rams played each other, and they didn't play San Francisco. So I don't know who they played, but they won that game, obviously. Then they played New England in week 2. That's right, overtime win against the Patriots. Week 3, they played. Who did they play in week 3? They beat somebody, stayed undefeated. It wasn't a pretty victory by any stretch of the imagination, but they got it done. And then they lost to Detroit, and then they lost last week to the Giants. So I don't think they've played a game in the division, but the 49ers have. This is their 3rd division game, and they've lost the first 2, right? So they can't afford to lose this game, can the San Francisco 49ers. They just can't. Like, they have to win this game. And so I see that desperation coming from them in this game. And look, let's be honest. Even though the 49ers are a little off, they're still the 49ers, and they would have won the game on Sunday against Arizona if they had a field goal kicker. If Jake Moody doesn't injure himself, they win that game. All right. Now, they still fumbled the ball, and they still could have won without Jake Moody if they didn't fumble the ball. And they've been very negligent in the fourth quarter. So even if they're up by 10 or 13 in the fourth quarter of this game, I don't trust them right now. They haven't gotten it done in the fourth quarter of games earlier this season against the Rams and the Cardinals last week. So I even if they're up 23-10 heading into the fourth quarter of this game, I'm not going to be sold that they're going to win. Like, they've blown fourth quarter leads this season in both of their NFC West games. So they're not to be trusted, but they're still a good football team. And I think the biggest difference I'm seeing with them is they're not finding the end zone. Like, last year, they were scoring 30 and 40 like their mind was going bad. They were blowing out teams, putting up big, crazy numbers. They missed Christian McCaffrey because he's a touchdown machine, right? Jordan Mason is playing well, but he fumbled last week in a big spot. He doesn't have the same nose for the end zone as McCaffrey does. And that's what's hurting them. They're not finishing drives with touchdowns. They're leaving opportunities open and the door ajar for teams to come back and steal games from them. Brock Purdy has been solid this year. He hasn't been terrible, right? He's had some really good games last week, not so much, right? But all in all, he's been solid. They could have won every game they've played this season. Every game. But they haven't. They lost close to the Vikings. They lost close, should have won against the Rams. Lost close, should have won against Arizona. So they're still good. They're just not what we've been accustomed to seeing. And the difference in this league is minuscule between playoff team, one of the best in the league, or outside looking in at 9-8. Those 2 losses could be the difference between the 49ers making the playoffs and missing the playoffs this year. But they can't dwell on that. Quick turnaround on the road in Seattle. Seattle started off hot. They need this one too, because they're riding a 2-game losing streak, inexplicably losing at home to the Giants. If they don't win this game and they fall to 3-3, I think they're going to suffer the same fate they had last year, which is they're going to miss the playoffs. They're going to be competitive, but they're going to miss the playoffs because you can't do the things that they've done over the last couple of weeks and expect to continue to win, right? Can't turn the ball over. DK Metcalf has fumbled in each of the last 2 games. You can't keep turning the ball over and block kick to go to overtime. You can't keep doing stupid shit and expecting to win, right? So we'll see what they can get done. Here's the thing. They didn't give the ball to Kenneth Walker III last week. Inexplicable. I don't understand what the logic was there. They're gonna. I guarantee you, he's gonna get 20 some odd carries tonight, and he has to. That's in order for them to be the team that they're supposed to be. He needs to touch the football. Geno Smith is cool, but he's not carrying a squad. They can't turn it over tonight. They can't do it. And the way I see it, I think the 49ers are going to be able to run the football. The Giants, Tyrone Tracy, first career start, had 127 yards on like 18 carries. Ate their ass alive. You can't stop Tyrone Tracy in the Giants run game. You in trouble against the 49ers and their run game. So I think Jordan Mason's going to have a big night. But they got to finish drives. They can't turn the ball over. It was good to see Brandon Ayuk finally break out. He had a massive game last week. We'll see if that continues tonight. Hopefully Kittle's healthy enough to go. He's been battling some injuries. He's huge for them. Debo, they got to get him more involved too. He's been non-existent this year. Like, I know no McCaffrey matters, but no Debo is also a big deal. And he hasn't touched it enough. He's not being as impactful. They got to find the end zone. Too many field goals are being kicked. Too many open possessions. Too many turnovers. Too many mistakes. I think we see a focused 49ers team. They understand that 2-4. And I'm not saying you're dead, but if you fall to 2-4 and 0-3, you're not winning the division. I can tell you that much. You're not winning the division if you start 0-3 in the division. They understand the magnitude of this game to the 49ers. And I think it's that level of desperation coupled with them just saying, this is not who we are. We're better than this. And I just don't think Seattle's that good, personally. And so it's going to be a tough game because it's family business. You know how the family do it. But I see Jordan Mason running for over 100 yards tonight. I see Brock Purdy staying clean. He might have one interception. A ball gets batted in the air, gets picked off. But all in all, like, I see Brock Purdy on some 24 of 31 for 87, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, no interception type deal. Jordan Mason, 21 carries, 116 yards, and maybe 1 score. Like, I see that kind of night. And I see them snapping out of a little bit of a funk that they've gotten into to start this season off. I got the 49ers winning this game 29-21. All right, 29-21, or let's say 29-20. 29-20. The Seahawks have to go for 2 to make it a 1-score game, and they don't get it. And so they lose 29-20 in this game. Maybe they go for 1 and it's 29-21, and then they have to go for 2 the next time, but it's either 29-21 or 29-22 or 29-20. One of the 3. That's my final score. I got the 49ers tonight. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the 456th installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I thank everyone for joining me on this abbreviated episode. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow when I'll have my money picks of the week. So stay tuned for that. But until then, you guys have a good one. Hopefully I'll see you after Thursday Night Football tonight. Take care. God bless. And good night.